This is my second Ender 3 V2. It prints really good, but it keeps leaving these plastic shavings at the extruder. Well, I figured out what it is. It's a manufacturing defect in the extruder. So I'm going to replace this cheap plastic one with an aluminum one. I'll show you how to do it on today's Filament Friday. Filament Friday is brought to you every week by the generous donations of these Patreon supporters. Here's the issue I was facing. These shavings kept showing up. It wasn't a blocked hot end. It wasn't slipping filament. I couldn't figure it out. And then I took the coupling off and I discovered an extra hole inside the insert. This was misdrilled. It wasn't worn by filament because filament wouldn't fit in that second hole. But it was actually shaving filament off the edge, and then when it retracted, it would throw it onto the gear. I decided to replace it with this aluminum one from Creality that I found on Amazon for just under $12. To take the old one off, you take this screw off to remove the arm and the spring. Set that aside. Then there's 3 screws that remove the top, and this also holds the motor, so the motor will drop. Be careful. And then you have to disconnect the wiring from the motor. You can see how messed up this thing is, just loaded with little shavings. So here's the kit. It comes with some instructions. Most of it's Chinese, but the picture is really good. So the first step was to take the gear off of the old one. You can see it's slightly worn. And now we're going to put the new one on and try to put it at the same position, but I'm going to readjust this later. In fact, I found I put this on upside down, which I'll explain in a minute. But anyway, there's 2 screws that hold it in place, and one goes against the flat side. Then I used the soft brush from my Filament Friday toolkit, cleaned it all off, and I was ready to reassemble. I put the motor back in place, I put the new aluminum top, and then the same 3 screws, although it comes with new screws, same 3 screws hold it in place to the bracket. Tighten those guys up, and then we're ready to put the arm together. The arm comes as pieces, so there's a screw, you got to make sure you get the right one. There's a lock washer, that goes onto the bearing, and then the bearing screws into the arm. And this needs to be tight, but then make sure that the bearing can spin freely. Next, we'll prepare the arm. There's a screw that goes into the arm, and this is going to guide the spring. Screw that almost all the way in, and then there's an insert goes in the arm, and then the long screw goes into that, and we're ready to put it on the bracket. Put it down in the hole, the same place the old one was removed, and just finger tighten it. Then we're going to take the spring, and we're going to put an insert in it. This is how you can adjust tension. So you put that in place over that screw we put on the arm, and then push it into place so it lines up at the hole. And then there's another screw that goes into this that screws into that insert so we can put pressure on the spring. Once you've got that in place, now it's time to tighten the screw for the arm. You tighten it all the way and it should still pivot. So tighten it all the way and just make sure that it still pivots. According to the instructions, I put the gear on upside down. So this is the proper way, even though I matched what it was before. I lined it up center to the pulley and let the spring hold it in place while I tighten the 2 set screws, and I could easily get to them. The coupling is larger on this one, so I screwed it in place, and then I'll take the old coupling off and slide the PTFE tube into this. I just hand tightened it, so now I had to pull out the blue clip and then pull this guy off. So I pressed it and twisted a little bit, and then it came off. But the end of this needed to be cleaned up. So I put it into my PTFE cutter that I showed in a previous video, chopped that nice and straight, and now I had a perfect PTFE edge to push into this thing all the way. Then I locked it in with the blue clip, and all that was left was to reconnect the motor. So now I wanted to verify the E-steps were still correct, so I loaded up some filament, and then I'm going to use that PTFE cutter, which is exactly 100 millimeters long, and mark the spot, just like I showed in the previous video. I have Gyro's firmware that I've showed in the previous video, version 1.31. I went to the Move menu, and I set it to 100 millimeters. It heated up, and then I pressed the button, and it ran filament. And here you can see it doing a nice dance as it pushes out 100 millimeters. It's kind of cool. And then I checked it, and it was spot on. So I didn't have to adjust the E-steps. So I decided to print a CHEP cube, and then I paused it after the first 2 layers just to check it. And then here's the finished print. This was a 0.28, so it's not the best print, but it worked well. And here's the best part. No more shavings, so I did fix the problem. And there you have it, an aluminum extruder mounted on my Ender 3 V2. Frankly, for the price of these things, it should come with that right out of the box, not this cheap plastic crap, especially one that's defective. Come on, Creality, if you're listening, do it right. If you've encountered the same issue, I'm curious how many are out there. Let me know in the comments below. If you like what I'm doing here, maybe check out some of the other videos that are popping up, and if nothing else, click on that CHEP logo and subscribe. I'll see you next time right here at Filament Friday.